It's excruciatingly painful when we see a well known, trusted pastor who we find out was not who we thought they were. And that's what happened with Robert Morris. A little over a year ago, the news broke that this trusted pastor that so many people from across the world looked up to and read their books, and he was an overseer for so many other churches. The news breaks that in his past, he had SA'd a 12-year-old girl, and it had been covered up for decades. But as heinous as that is, it's even worse when we find out that other trusted church leaders and that the church system has actually covered for and protected abusers and predators who have allegations like this. And now, Robert Morris, if you are not familiar, he's been removed from Gateway Church and he's now in the middle of criminal court proceedings over these issues. At the same time, though, while he's going through criminal court proceedings in Oklahoma over his deeds, he's suing his previous church, Gateway, because he wants more money from them. He is suing them for millions of dollars that he thinks they owe him. And in that civil case, as court documents have come out, there's court documents that are out there for the public that are showing us it looks like there were many other well known pastors, elders, overseers of Robert Morris who knew that Cindy was an underage victim when this happened, yet they covered it up for years. And this is from Robert Morris himself. He's provided most of this in these court proceedings. Now, there are a lot of churches. We hear from a lot of churches and people who say, the church threatened to sue us. They threatened to do all this. They sent us cease and desist letters. And sometimes churches will. And that can be scary because these big churches have really big legal budgets. But at the same time, a lot of churches are just posturing when they do that because the reality is once you get something into court, you open yourself up to discovery and for truths coming out that a lot of times they don't want to come out. And that's exactly what's happening here in this Robert Morris situation. As Morris is suing Gateway, a lot of things are coming out that I don't think he wants to come out. I don't think any of his friends wanted to come out. But when someone gets desperate enough and needs money, you're finally willing to stop covering for your friends. You're finally willing to stop protecting yourself because things are not going well for him as far as being in the middle of the criminal case and all of that. So there's a lot for him to worry about when there's no reason for you to cover anymore, or there's a reason for you to share that information. Now all of this is coming out, and I want to talk about it because it's been heartbreaking. Here is the story, the article that was posted on the Roy's Report, but it's Jimmy Evans and New Life Church elders knew Robert Morris abused a 12-year-old decades ago, and this is based on documents. And you look right there, you got Robert Morris, you got Jimmy Evans, and you got Brady Boyd, who is the pastor of New Life Church in Colorado. I believe it's in Colorado, but he was also at Gateway before he, got there. And you're looking at some very well-known megachurch pastors who very well-known ministry leaders who have been respected for a long time. Although Jimmy Evans has come under fire a lot lately because it seems like with every other day, we're finding out he may not be who we thought he was. And I think his behavior has really shown him as someone different than he claimed to be for a long time. And I think his behavior has probably disqualified him. But these people have ran together. These were friends. These were guys that it looks like covered for one another because that was the best thing for their ministry. It was the best thing to protect them. They were all actually better and had more opportunity when they were covering for one another. And that's what I call the church mafia. It's like this church cabal where you've got all of these influential pastors and church leaders that when they get dirt on one another, oftentimes they cover for one another, they cover sin, they cover misdeeds. This is not all pastors by far, but this is very common in that celebrity, very influential pastor world. It's more common than you would think. They cover for each other because they're afraid if I tell the truth about someone's sin, they're going to expose my sin. And it becomes this self perpetuating issue where sin's allowed to grow in the dark because we're not willing to face the consequences of our own sin, so therefore we hide other people's. This article says when news broke a year ago that famous Dallas pastor had SA'd a 12-year-old girl in the 1980s, church leaders across several states swore they knew nothing about it. Jimmy Evans was one of those. We're going to see quite a few others. But now it turns out from these court documents that they did. Just released court documents show that Bible teacher Jimmy Evans and leaders at a Colorado megachurch knew all along that Gateway Church founder Robert Morris had SA'd Cindy Clemenchier, and not only that he had SA'd her, but that she was a minor when this happened. Despite this, Evans said in a statement last year that he was shocked and devastated by recent revelations of Clemenchier's abuse, and he wasn't the only one. There were a lot of Christian leaders. I think it was James Robinson is one that we're going to see, who came out and said, "Oh, this is terrible. We're against Robert Morris. We're for the victims. We didn't know this. He hadn't told us the truth about all these things. Yet now that we're seeing these court documents, it looks like they knew." And they said, we're shocked, we're disgusted, we're devastated. We didn't know about any of this. And you're going to see throughout this article and throughout these court documents, there are actually people who even made those statements who later pulled them down. Because it's one thing to say, "Oh, I didn't know, that's terrible." And then when it comes out that you did know, to say, "Well, maybe I just misremembered." This is something way too heinous for someone to misremember or for someone to forget. Brady Boyd, the pastor at New Life Church, a megachurch in Colorado Springs, was reportedly informed of Clemenchier's abuse in 2007, but he acted like the abuse was news to him, something he didn't know when it became public. Yet, we're actually going to see not only from court documents, emails, and stuff like that, but we hear from Cindy Clemenchier's sister and her own testimony in this article where she said, "No, I was a part of this church. I was a part of New Life Church. And when they tried to hire this guy, I said, 'Don't hire him. He was a part of Gateway with Robert Morris, and he knew.'" She was saying, "This is what happened to my sister. We don't want anybody leading our church from Gateway. We got to be careful about this." So we got her testimony that is here as well. But again, he knew in 2007 is what this says, but he acted like the abuse was something that he didn't know when it came out last year. Addressing New Life's congregation in June 2024, Boyd said it had been a hard week for him personally, and he urged congregants to pray for Cindy Clemenchier, who came forward with what he called new information that had led to Morris's resignation. And I will try to link this when we get done. You can go to the Roy's Report, you can read this article, and you can actually watch this video of him where he talks about this. I'm not going to play it today, but you can watch that where he talks about this and basically says that he didn't know. But again, these documents, Cindy's sister, her testimony goes back and says, no, in 2007, he knew. The stunning revelations about what Evans and New Life knew and when they knew, maybe the most important, are included in a motion filed last Friday in Tarrant County, Texas, as a part of Morris's lawsuit with Gateway over that money. And again, if you go to this article, you can actually see all of these things. So you can click on that and you can see the actual motions. You can read all the court documents, all that sort of stuff. You can look at it if you would like to go deeper. But Clemenchier's sister, Karen Black, also spoke with the Roy's Report and confirmed the events mentioned in the documents provided in those court documents and the details they talk about. In the motion and its attached exhibits, Morris admits that he SA'd Clemenchier when she was 12, but Morris repeatedly argues that he informed Gateway elders of this fact in 2005, in 2007, and in 2011. Yet, he states that the elders continued to employ him and agreed to pay him millions in retirement monies. Jimmy Evans was a Gateway elder or an apostolic elder, just like with Mercy Culture. They had Dr. Michael Brown and Tom Lane, who we're going to talk about here in a minute, from Gateway, as their apostolic elders or overseers. So these are people supposed to be overseeing the church from the outside. Evans was one of those elders for Gateway during the years, and Boyd was an elder in both 2005 and 2007. So when it says Morris actually argues and gives some evidence that he had told the elders about this in 2005, 2007, 2011, well, in 2005 and 2007, Jimmy Evans and Boyd were both elders. In 2007, Boyd left Gateway to lead New Life, which had been embroiled in its own scandals up to that point. But he went there, and in 2007, not only was he on the board at Gateway before he went there, but when he was going there, Cindy's sister, Karen Black, protested and spoke explicitly, very clearly to New Life leaders about Morris and Clemenchier when she heard about Boyd's selection. Yet what they do, They hired the guy anyway. They hired him anyway, and he has been the pastor ever since. Black told TRR that she was a New Life member at the time and was concerned that hiring Boyd would increase Morris's influence on that church. So her concern initially wasn't Boyd as much as it was, hey, he's from Gateway, he's one of these elders. We don't want Robert Morris because she says, hey, he's dangerous, he's an abuser, he's a predator. We don't want him to have influence over our church, especially because we've already got scandals in our past. So in 2007, Black said she met with New Life's pastoral search committee and told them that Morris had essayed her sister for years in the 1980s, beginning when Cindy was just 12. So not only did Brady Boyd know this, not only did the other elders, Jimmy Evans, know this, it looks like, but the elders and the pastoral search team New Life should have known this in 2007. According to a 2006 article in the Summit Daily, New Life search team included Lance Coles, Brian Newberg, John Bolin. So these are all fairly well known people. And it tells you everybody who was there, everybody who should have known but didn't do this. Also on the search team was Ross Parsley, who is now the pastor of One Chapel in Austin, Texas. Now, I don't know Parsley, but if I'm a part of a church and these people are in leadership in my church, I'm asking if these are the people who are in leadership at my church, I am asking, if you knew, why didn't you say anything? If you knew, why didn't you report this to the authorities for them to investigate? If you knew, why didn't you push this? Because instead, no one said anything. And Robert Morris was allowed to be one of America's most influential pastors for years after that. Best-selling author, everything else. He was the spiritual advisor to Donald Trump in the White House in his first term. This is the kind of influence the guy was allowed to have because no one said anything. Now, Parsley from One Chapel told the Roy's Report that he resigned early in the process to become a candidate for the senior pastor position. So he says, as a result, he was not involved in the search committee's meetings or discussions. So he says, hey, I didn't know. So if you're a part of One Chapel, I think that makes sense as long as the timeline lines up. If he had already resigned, he may not know. But for everybody else here, there are significant questions that I think we have to ask. And again, to be above reproach, they should be able, and not only able, they should be willing to answer those. It says not only did New Life proceed with hiring Boyd after the meeting with Black in 2007, but it made Morris, whom Boyd described as one of his closest friends, an overseer. So they did not listen to Black when she said, hey, this person, we don't want to hire him because we don't want Robert Morris to have any more influence in our church because he SA'd my sister when she was 12. He SA'd a child. Not only did she tell them that, but they seemed to ignored all of it because they not only hired Boyd, they made Robert Morris an apostolic overseer, an elder. And by the way, he was an elder and apostolic overseer of a lot of other churches. Because if you remember, Church of the Highlands, one of the largest churches in the country, he actually was removed as one of their apostolic elders when this first came out. So this guy is not just getting away with it on his own. This guy is influencing the biggest churches in the country because nobody said anything. Now, again, Brady Boyd was on his elder board and should have known. Brady Boyd became the senior pastor of this church where they were told this. Brady Boyd is on some of the emails and stuff that were sent. So he can't say, I didn't know he was on these emails. But here's what he said in a previous blog. And they've got the screenshot here, but they've also got it where you can click and you can read the whole blog if you would like. But he talks about on his blog a time where Robert Morris was his guest speaker. And there's a couple of important things here, some that don't even have to do with this, but just they're enlightening about church culture. He's talking about guidelines for guest speakers at New Life. And this is in November of 2010. He says, this weekend we had Pastor Robert Morris as a guest speaker at New Life. Pastor Robert is the senior pastor at Gateway Church in DFW and is one of the overseers of New Life, plus one of my closest friends. So one, it looks like he was covering for Morris because Morris was one of his closest friends. But also, watch this. Here's another reason why so many of these people cover for one another. And again, it's why we've got to dismantle the celebrity Christian systems. We've got to dismantle this celebrity Christian cabal and church mafia where they're all covering for one another. Because until the system is changed, there's no reason for them not to cover for one another. Pastor Robert spoke both Sunday morning gatherings and did a great job. Meanwhile, this is important. Meanwhile, I was at Gateway as his guest, speaking twice on Saturday and once on Sunday. Now, you may be saying, Jeff, why is that important? Well, I have been responsible for paying a lot of these guys for massive conferences, events, stuff like that. I have been around enough to know that these big guest speakers always get paid, taken care of. They don't just get paid and taken care of. A lot of times they get lavish gifts. The green room is ridiculous, all in the name of honor culture. We have to honor these guest speakers that we are bringing. I had been a part of it. I've thrown out the lavish gifts. I've done all of it. I've had to repent of that. But when I talk about this, this is stuff that I've seen. I'm not talking about stuff that I've not seen, that I've not been a part of. These guys get paid oftentimes, and you can see it in like the celebrity preaching scam that Julie Roy's talked about and stuff like that. Guys on this level, like $10,000 is where you start for them to come preach for you most of the time. Actually, when I was doing a lot of these conferences and stuff, $10,000 would only get us some of the people. A lot of the biggest names and stuff that, man, they needed like 20,000 plus to come speak for a single service at a conference. Now, sometimes they'd take less because they'd come and they get to sell books, but they'd sell books, they do book signings. This is very lucrative for a celebrity pastor to come to another big mega church and be able to sell books to that audience and be able to make money from the honorarium. So here's the thing. This weekend they had a guest speaker, and it wasn't just I'm inviting this guy that I trust and is my friend to speak to you because I'm going to be gone. No, we switched. Robert is speaking here and I'm speaking at Robert's church. And guess what? I probably made $10,000 to $20,000 to be at his church and got to sell my books and do my thing. And he made $10,000 to $20,000 to preach at my church and do these sort of things. So y'all just think we got a good guest speaker. And in reality, on top of what we're already being paid as a salary, which for both of these guys is my guess, they don't have financial transparency as far as I've seen. But my guess is these are very high salaries for these people. They're much higher than most average pastor salaries. Beyond that, I guarantee you that they don't actually disclose. I would almost be willing to bet my mortgage on it that they don't disclose their housing allowance, which is also probably lavish. But beyond all that, that the church doesn't know, these guys are just switching and speaking in each other's churches all year and selling these books and doing these book signings all year. And they are exchanging tens, 20, $30,000. These guys like this traveling to all these different churches, they may make a few $100,000 to $1 million just guest speaking at other people's churches. And churches don't realize when we don't ask these questions, we don't realize this isn't just about guest speaking. A lot of times, this is just money funneling, donor money funneling from one church to the other. And it doesn't have to be reported as their income from the church. They say, no, I make that from speaking events and books and stuff like that. Yes, from your friends' churches. So again, it's a part of this celebrity culture that we've got to pay attention to. I am fine for someone making money speaking and everything else, but look, there's just not many pastors that you can make me believe they should be being paid $10,000 or more to preach a sermon. And churches should know whether they're getting this and stuff like that. And if they're already getting paid a really good salary, then hey, if you want to do the ministry and speak for each other, do that. This doesn't need to be a way of pastors enriching themselves. But again, if your livelihood and you making hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years, if not more than that, is tied to covering for this person and being in a good relationship with them, are you not going to cover for them? See, these are the things that lead to a lot of people covering sin that should never be covered. When Gateway heard about Black's meeting with New Life leaders, they convened a special elder meeting to discuss how to respond. You can actually read this letter right here in this exhibit. It's basically just people trying to figure out from a PR perspective, how do we respond if they go any more public about this? How do we try to protect Robert Morris's reputation? When I read it, that's really all that I have seen. Morris recounted what happened with Clemish in the 1980s and his process of repentance and restoration, the letter states. And it adds that the pastor of Robert Morris in the 1980s, who actually oversaw his restoration at Shady Grove Church, that they corroborated Robert's account. But the letter outlines a suggested response to Black's disclosure. And basically, they talked about this again from like a PR perspective. If they go any more public with this, this is how we will respond. And that was really all they were talking about, is how are we going to respond? Other documents in Friday's filing shows that New Life leaders and Gateway elders were again told about Morris's crimes in 2011. Included in Friday's filing was an anonymous 2011 email. And just like with all of this stuff, you can click those links, you can go see it. Adobe wants me to sign in, but outside of that, you can read all of these things. So you can see this 2011 email. It was addressed to Morris, New Life pastors, Brady Boyd, and Coles. It was addressed to the elders at Gateway. It was addressed to Tom Lane, who was an elder and overseer. And by the way, you may be saying, Jeff, Tom Lane, that name sounds familiar. Well, that's because Tom Lane, in addition to Dr. Michael Brown, was one of the two apostolic overseers that was on Mercy Culture's website just a few weeks ago. Now, when I checked it earlier this week, I couldn't find it in the same place. And it looks like they may have actually removed their apostolic elders from the website in a way of in a behavior and an action that makes them less transparent. But it makes a whole lot more sense. I couldn't figure out why they'd removed him when this stuff came out. Made a whole lot more sense that it seems awfully coincidental that you would remove them before Tom Lane is in the news again. But Tom Lane was very involved, an elder for a long time at Gateway, but he's also been an apostolic elder and very involved in Mercy Culture. So again, a lot of these churches that we're talking about, there's a lot of overlap. Why is there a lot of overlap? Could it be that many of them are covering for one another? It's the system protecting itself. At least that's what it looks like in a lot of these places. So you can make your own decision about Tom Lane's involvement with Mercy Culture, but I think that's a huge red flag. I think it's something we got to notice. And they also included media in this email, multiple media outlets, but the email subject line was news release, Pastor Robert Morris of Gateway Church in Dallas, essays, a 12-year-old girl, and he included Clemashir's name, her parents' names, and other details about that. Now, Gateway, how did they respond? They basically just threatened this guy with legal threats. The Roy's report said they reached out this week to Boyd, Coles, and New Life Church for comment about their actions in light of knowing more about Morris's abuse in 2007. And conveniently, and something that's all too common, no one responded. However, in March, when TRR first learned about Black's meeting with the search committee, we emailed Coles and he responded then that since Morris is now being tried for child SA crimes, that they weren't going to comment on this. They said New Life respectfully declines a request for a media interview and trusts the judicial process to reach a just and appropriate conclusion. I would hope that that judicial process they're trusting starts asking why so many mandated reporters who should have known about this never said a word. Now, I come from a state where it's not just pastors that are mandated reporters, but in our state, everybody's a mandatory reporter. If you know about crimes and abuse against a child, you have to report it. Otherwise, there's criminal repercussions for you. So I hope that those questions are being asked in these court proceedings. This week, we also reached out to Evans, who is mentioned several other times in Morris's court documents. But surprise, surprise, Jimmy Evans didn't respond. And that email, by the way, that was sent out that has Tom Lane, all the elders, New Life staff. It actually had Larry Stockstill from Bethany Church in Louisiana. I can't remember the exact name of that church, but Larry Stockstill, I've only heard good things about Larry Stockstill over the years. I've met him a couple of times at staff events when I was on staff at a very large church. But I can tell you this, Larry Stockstill's name was attached to that as someone who this person on the email said knew. And that's a whole nother connection because Larry Stockstill is basically the mentor and the pastor of Chris Hodges before he launched Church of the Highlands. So again, guys, we're going to do a video on this soon about how interconnected this web is. All of these guys are connected. All of these guys are connected. So again, a lot of times when they cover for each other, why are they doing it? I think it would be dishonest to not at least entertain the idea that it's the system protecting itself. There's way too much connection between all of these charismatic celebrity leaders that are falling right now. And it seems like they should have known about these sort of things. And they're all just flocking together in relationship and leadership with one another and making a fortune off of speaking at one another's churches. The document also implicated other former Gateway elders and apostolic elders like the late Jack Hayford and televangelist James Robinson. And if you look, James Robinson, they actually include this later on in the article, but James Robinson was one of the ones that came out with his wife and had a statement on YouTube and stuff that just said, when all this happened, hey, we're heartbroken over this. We didn't know any of this was going on. But again, this document says they did know what was going on. So we got to ask, if that's the case, Is there something wrong with the document or did you lie, James Robinson? Because again, there's a whole lot of people who came out when this happened and said, oh, we're so heartbroken. We had no clue. And now, multiple of those people, it turns out you should have had a lot of clues because you were told, you were emailed, there's a paper trail to you. It says, including in the filing was a proposed announcement that Morris reportedly wrote in 2011 and distributed to all of Gateway's elders at the time. Again, because this person was essentially emailing them and saying, if you don't take this to the authorities, this person was not asking for money. They said, if you don't take this to the authorities and report Robert Morris, then I'm going to keep telling more people and sending this to more news outlets. Now, I don't know if this person just didn't have enough information to get it to the right news outlets or if they stopped after all of the legal threats and stuff from Gateway, but Morris writes this proposed announcement that basically is going to tell the church, hey, these people are always trying to email us and blackmail us and all this stuff, which that email wasn't. But he had a proposed announcement that you can actually read that says, it's basically, this is what he was proposing to the elders. We tell the church about this. So at one point, he was going to own up to some of this stuff just to try to pull back some of the heat, but get his church behind him by saying, we're not going to submit to any sort of blackmail. Now, also, you notice right here, January 28th, 2020, Mark Driscoll has talked about the fact that you've got Robert Morris and Jimmy Evans are some of the guys that not only helped restore him to ministry, even though the elders at Mars Hill still say to this day, he has not repented, he's not qualified for ministry. His elders never released him. But these guys, Jimmy Evans and Robert Morris, said, now we'll be your elders, we'll release you. And you see in this picture right here, they were his original elders at Trinity. And again, if you know the story of Mark Driscoll, if you've listened to Rise and Fall on Mars Hill, Mark's past is full of spiritually abusive behavior. His own elders at Mars Hill still say to this day that he is disqualified, yet he calls Evans and Morris his pastors, and they serve as overseers of the Trinity Church. Again, birds of a feather flock together. You're seeing all of these guys, all of these connections. Why are they all so connected? Why was Jimmy Evans and Robert Morris so willing and so just energized and excited about the fact of putting Mark Driscoll right back into ministry in Arizona? We got to start asking these questions. What do they know? Why are they covering for one another? Why are they all so connected when so many of them, it's coming out, are having a history of hurting people and of spiritual abuse? In the announcement, Morris admits to kissing and petting Clemishire, who was about 2 weeks before her 13th birthday. Now, I understand why he never actually made this, why he never read the statement, because if he did, he would have been removed right then. So it essentially looks like the elders never allowed him to read this proposed statement, but they knew. They knew if this is true, right? The proposed announcement also states that Jimmy Evans and I spoke with Clemishire's pastor a few years ago, and he gave us a good report. And Clemishire actually, she adds some context to it, but she does say, yes, they met with her pastor in Oklahoma City at the time. So Clemishire confirmed with TRR that Crow met with Morris and Evans around that time, and Crow was her pastor. They reached out to him for a comment, but he didn't respond. Despite these multiple indications Evans knew years ago about Morris's abuse of Clemishire as a child, Evans posted a statement in June of 2024 saying, just like everybody else, he was shocked and devastated by these revelations. He claimed that Morris had told him he had an affair with a woman in his early 20s, but he was unaware of anything like the allegations shared in that week. And you can see the post that he made right there in the article. You can also see the video where James Robinson said the same thing that I talked about a minute ago, that he had no clue. But again, according to these documents, they all had a clue. So either the documents are fake, which it doesn't look like they are, but either these documents are fake or they got out in public and lied to their churches and the body of Christ at large just to try to save face. And that's what it looks like is happening here. That is the most likely explanation that I can think of. Because again, these documents don't look doctored. And if they were fake, this is a lot of documents. So it would have to be doctored. You can go, you can look in the court proceedings. Also, if you're trying to doctor fake documents, why would you use that in court where that is going to be very easy for them to figure that out? Again, so this is pretty damning evidence right now to these big time ministry leaders who it looks like they just got out and lied to everybody about what they do. Another former Gateway elder mentioned numerous times in Morris's court document is Tom Lane from the Executive Leadership Institute. And again, Tom Lane was the apostolic overseer, along with Dr. Michael Brown, for Mercy Culture Church. Do with that what you will. However, when TRR presented Lane with the evidence contained in the recent court filing, because what they said was Lane also issued a statement last June that denied he knew Clemishier's age when the abuse occurred. But when TRR presented Lane with evidence contained in a recent court filing, he didn't reply. He had his attorney reply, and his attorney replied Tom removed his original statement after subsequently seeing some past communications from 2011. Rather than attempting to adhere to memory and mental impressions, he anticipates releasing additional statements at some time in the future after the benefit of reviewing everything relevant. So essentially, here's what this attorney said. He removed that statement. He saw some things that showed that wasn't true, so he removed that statement, but he's not going to talk about it until he releases another statement, but he's not going to release another statement until he's had the benefit of reviewing everything else. Why would you do that? To me, this sounds like, and again, this is just my opinion, this sounds like his attorney saying, yeah, you're right. You caught him. He removed that statement because it wasn't true. He's not making another statement until he knows what else is out there. Because if he gives another statement, he doesn't know what he needs to lie about versus what is going to come out and prove him another liar. Again, that's my opinion. That's how I'm reading this, but that's what it looks like to me. And again, he removed his statement. There's a difference in removing your statement and then coming on. If you've got to correct a statement, you need to correct it the same way that you made it. So I had to make a small correction. It was just small, but a small correction to something I said in a bad sermon review earlier this week. Well, now if you watch that video, it's in the pinned comment, it's in the description. There are links and multiple cards in the video. And then in the standalone video, I included a video correction where I clarified what was going on, what I made a mistake on, where it was there. Again, because I needed to make the correction in the same way that I made the mistake or I made the false statement. Why did he not do that? Taking down a false statement is totally different than coming out and saying in the same way, hey, what I said was not true. Let me tell you why I said something that wasn't true. And it sounds like, again, that they're trying to say, when they say rather than attempting to adhere to memory and mental impressions, it sounds like they're trying to say, he probably just forgot, which it does not seem believable to me. All right. Former Gateway elder Steve Doolin and founder of Master Plan Business Ministries was similarly named in multiple documents. They reached out to him. He didn't answer. There's a pattern here. None of these people are answered because it looks like they're being backed into a corner. We also reached out to Gateway Church for a comment, and I will give Gateway credit. Since they got rid of Robert Morris and they got rid of elders that they say knew about this and started this investigation, they've been much more honest and forthright than everybody else. That doesn't mean that everything they've said is honest. I can't tell you that, but they've been much more willing to speak out than everybody else. But they reached out to Gateway Church for comment, and a church spokesman replied that Morris's filing is just the latest sad attempt by Robert Morris to deflect blame away from himself and others for his criminal actions. We have consistently and publicly stated that there were elders and employees at Gateway who knew about this issue before it all became public and either didn't take action or didn't inquire further, and that was fundamentally wrong. So I appreciate the fact that Gateway is still sticking to their guns on this and saying, look, there were people on our elder board, they knew or should have knew, and they were wrong. They caused more hurt. The church also noted that it already removed. They said, we've already removed the elders who knew about Morris and failed to act. And then it gives a list of the people they removed last year. However, in one of the documents, it actually says Morris said that through 2023, that every elder who came on board at Gateway was told about these things and then had to decide and sign a document to say essentially if they were, and I don't know if they had to sign a document, but they had to decide if they still wanted to be an elder after knowing that. So the Roy's report asked Gateway about that, because if that's true, if that timeline's true, it would mean that some of the current elders who weren't removed, like Trey Wilbanks, would potentially have known. But Gateway reiterated. They said, hey, anybody who knew or should have known has already been removed from the elder board. And they said that not Wilbanks or any of the other elders, because Trey Wilbanks leads the elders at this point, that none of them that are still there knew about this until the news became public. So again, there's a lot here. There's a lot that we didn't talk about. You can take a look at not only this article, but you can take a look at all of the court documents. They're all out there, all the emails, all the stuff. You can go do as deep of a dive as you want, but this is incredibly damning evidence that again, it shows by all accounts that it looks like people like Jimmy Evans and James Robinson and potentially guys like Larry Stockstill and Brady Boyd and all of these big celebrity church pastors, Tom Lane, all of these guys knew or should have known that Robert Morris had SA'd a child and they covered it up. But again, they're all in network with one another. Their relationships and influence have all gotten them better jobs. Most of these guys are overseeing other big churches and influential churches like Mercy Culture. And by all accounts, it looks like they're probably, I would love to see financial documents if they would release them. But it looks like by all accounts that they're getting rich and enriching themselves financially by those relationships. So it looks like they covered for each other. And these are some pretty good reasons why they have likely covered from each other. And guys, why are we talking about this? We're talking about this because until we require transparency in the system, until the people of the church say we will no longer support leaders and churches and church systems that protect each other at the expense of the sheep, that hide sin for the sake of protecting reputations and financial gain, until we say that, nothing is going to change. These scandals will keep coming out, but nothing is going to change because this system has a lot of toxicity and it's just got to be removed. We've got to say, this is not okay. And we will not support in any way, we will not allow a system that allows sin and abuse to be hidden in order to protect people. That's why I wanted to talk about this because there are many people who, when I talk about this stuff, they'll say, well, Jeff, these are isolated incidents. Most churches, most pastors are good people, good churches. And I would agree with that. I think the majority of pastors and churches are actually really good people who love Jesus, who are doing great work. But I don't think these incidents are as isolated as a lot of people like to say. And they're like, Jeff, even a lot of mega churches and stuff are really good people. And again, I'm not saying that they're not. What I am saying though, we cannot continue saying these are isolated incidents. We have to get to a point, and I don't think there's any other option. We have to get to a point to where we say there is something systemic in the modern celebrity megachurch system that is causing this, that is leading to this. That doesn't mean every celebrity pastor is bad and sinful and disqualified. It does not mean that. It doesn't mean that every megachurch is bad. I'm not saying that. But I am saying the ones that are good are having to fight against the gravitational pull of a broken system. And until we identify this and call a spade and say this is systemic, and until we deal with the systems that cause it, these things are going to keep happening. They're going to keep happening. And when we talk about certain systems, because I'm pretty hard on ARC, the Association of Related Churches, I'm pretty hard on their systems a lot. Now, I'll also tell you, not every ARC church is bad. And there are ARC churches in my community that I have hyper respect for them and their pastors. There are ARC churches that I'm reaching out to right now to take the Safe Church Pledge because we are not against ARC churches. But we do speak to ARC systems because we have heavy concerns. I specifically have very heavy concerns about ARC systems. And people will say, why are you bagging on these systems? Why are you so against ARC with all the good things they've done? But when you look just in this article alone, you have Robert Morris, who was one of their apostolic elders. You have Larry Stockstill named, and we still don't know exactly what his involvement was, but there's potential involvement. That was Chris Hodges' mentor. You've got all kinds of other scandals and people who have fallen and hidden things and had all these other struggles from John Gray to Mekon Carter, all of these other people around Chris Hodges and ARC. And even the leader of ARC right now, Dino Rizzo, before he got to, and I'm not saying Dino's a bad guy, but before Dino got to Chris Hodges' Church of the Highlands and ARC, he was removed from his own church because of an affair and a moral failure. So at some point, we got to say there's too much smoke surrounding specific systems like ARC to not say there's something systemic that we need to deal with. And it's not just ARC, because there are multiple systems like that in this megachurch celebrity world. But I'm telling you, if we don't deal with these systemic issues, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse because there are a whole lot of small and medium sized churches and a whole lot of church plants who, from day one, they're not megachurches, but they're running these systems because they want to be a big church. They want to reach thousands of people. They want to make a difference for the kingdom. They have great hearts in doing this. But if we don't do something about the systems causing this, they're going to become a part of the same system. And it's going to be really hard for them not to become a part of that church cabal that covers for one another because there's something about the system. It's broken. Okay, so, again, I want to talk about this today because it's a reminder when we talk about these systems and when we talk about these church red flags, we're not just talking about them because we want to poke on churches. We're not just talking about them because we want to stop church growth. We're talking about them because these red flags lead to these kind of news reports. And if we would deal with the red flags, just like we had someone in the chat say earlier, if we dealt with this stuff earlier, like we could deal with it before it becomes criminal. And we should. We should expect our leaders to be above reproach. And I really do think part of the reform that is coming is that Christians all over the world are over the celebrity pastor culture. We're starting to see the cracks in the celebrity culture, megachurch celebrity world. And again, I'm not saying that the megachurch needs to go away and that every megachurch is bad. But what I'm saying is I think there is a movement that is starting and a call to reform where we say we're not okay with this anymore. We don't want celebrities. We want shepherds. We want leaders who are above reproach. We want leaders who will be transparent. We don't want CEOs. We want shepherds. And I think that's going to be very important. But I would love to hear from you. What do you think as you see these kind of bombshell allegations? You see these court documents that seem to indicate that a bevy of well-known Christian leaders, and more than just that, people who are overseeing other big churches, who are influencing so much of the Christian world that we know. How does it make you feel to see all these indications and evidence that they likely knew that Robert Morris had not only SA'd this person, but that Cindy was 12 years old when it happened, and they've covered it up 2007, 2011, 2005. Guys, this has been years that they've covered up. And more than that, how does it make you feel to know that some of those same people that knew came out and just bold faced lied in video statements, in social media posts, on the platform of the church, and said, I had no clue, only for us to finally find out that they did. And what would happen if Robert Morris wasn't so desperate to get this money from Gateway? If he wasn't desperate enough to sue them, and he probably needs this money to help pay his legal expenses. If Robert Morris wasn't this desperate, would he have ever uncovered his friends? Would we have ever known? And it just makes me wonder, how much of this stuff do we not know that has remained hidden because people didn't get desperate enough to expose their friends? Because in most cases, we would have never known that this was here. So when we talk about the Safe Church Pledge and everything else, I meet with pastors regularly who say, Jeff, I like this. I like this idea, but this seems like it's overly transparent. It seems like it's overly accountable. It's requiring so much more than we have to do. Yes. But the reason why is because we should be proactive with that accountability. We should be proactive with that transparency. We shouldn't have to wait for court documents and a lawsuit to come out to know that people are covering for one another. We shouldn't have to wait for court documents and a lawsuit to come out for us to say, whoa, how much money are they making off of each other, right? If we're transparent and accountable, then one, people know if there's a problem, they can ask questions early, and we remove this reproach, this stain from the body of Christ. So again, let me know what you think. But for me, I look at this and it's just a reminder this work is more important than ever because it's not good. It's going to take more than people with a microphone. It's going to take more than podcasters like me. It's going to take more than organizations like the Spiritual Abuse Institute or the Roy's Report or any of those. Guys, it is going to take all of us. You have a voice. I have a voice. It takes all of us standing and saying, we demand something better. We demand above reproach leaders and above reproach church. We demand a church that is not perfect, but is willing to call our own fouls and deal with our sin before it becomes something that traumatizes somebody for life. And the more of us that speak up together, the sooner that we're actually going to start making systemic change because this isn't about one church. This isn't about one denomination. This isn't about one pastor or one group. This is about the body of Christ in the Western world deciding, do we want to follow Jesus or do we want to keep following a celebrity culture that is out for itself and selling Jesus for their own fame and for their own riches? And I don't know about you, but I want to be a part of a church that trades all that celebrity culture and all of that entertainment for Jesus because he's enough. He's enough for me.